I honestly thought that that was it, that this was how my life was going to end. I saw myself jumping from that window. I felt my body fall. I felt the sensation of the fall. And in that moment of saying, I'm so profoundly lost, I found myself holding back, something catching me and saying, not yet.
Welcome, adventurers, to another episode of Character Talks. Today, we delve into the captivating story of Michelle Rios, a woman, like so many of us, who juggled the inner passion for success with the expectations, either true or imagined, of important people in her life. Michelle openly shares the day that brought her to the precipice of despair, a moment where the weight of her self-imposed shackles threatened to crush her spirit. But amidst the darkness, a flicker of defiance sparked in the most unlikeliest of places. This pivotal turning point became the catalyst for a profound journey of self-discovery. Join us as we explore Michelle's transformation, a journey from corporate warrior to authentic warrior. This is more than just a conversation. It's a testament to the human spirit's resilience and the transformative power of embracing our true selves. So tune in, prepare to be inspired by Michelle Rios' story of finding light in the darkest hour and realizing that sometimes the best chapters of our lives are yet to be written. In Character Talks, we aim to unearth the hidden gems of human resilience, courage, and growth. We bring you tales of ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary circumstances and emerged from the crucible of life forever changed. From tales of facing fear head-on, to serendipitous encounters that altered destinies, and from travels to distant lands that broadened horizons. To battles fought within, we believe that every experience holds the potential to shape us in profound ways. I'm Chris Christie, and this is Character Talks.
Just after it's been cut, and wade through the stream or maybe run through the river, even though you may get just a little bit wet. A bum bum sheeto, a bum bum sheeto. Wow, 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 wow. This is life.
Welcome to Character Talks. Again, I am so grateful for your time. Time is one of those things that I respect as much as anything in this world, because it's one of those things that we just can't get back. So when someone that's busy is of doing a service of their own and then takes time to, talk with me and speak with me on my project, I am very grateful. And so I know how busy you are. And so, Michelle, welcome to Character Talks.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be here.
One of the things that I really try to do when we get started is to, if you don't mind, giving us the kind of 20,000 foot view or Cliff Notes version of kind of who you are, where you came from. And we've talked about it a little bit, but I'd love for you to share with everyone and kind of what you're doing now. I think when we tell that story, the first thing that happens is you become relatable, which is, I will be honest, that's why the word that you chose was of no surprise to me, because that was the first thing I noticed about you and your personality. And so I think if you could just share a little bit about who you are and where you've come from, I think that'll help folks really relate to you.
All right. So how much time do we have here?
We have as much time as you want.
All right. I'm rolling up my sleeves because we're going to dig deep here. Well, first and foremost, I am a gal from Maine. I grew up in Maine. I was born in Maine. I grew up in Maine, and I live now right outside of Washington, D.C. But what they say is true. You can take the girl out of Maine, but you cannot take Maine out of the girl. And Maine is home for me. My parents are still there. I have a sister and her family still there. I have a ton of extended family, and I am still very close with a lot of the people that I grew up with. The people who knew you when kindergarten and so on and so forth are still the people that keep me honest, hold my toes to the fire. And a lot of the work that I do today in personal development is a direct response to wanting to give back to the community that raised me. So I am forever grateful to the Waterville, Oakland, Central Maine region. These are my peeps. I grew up going to Messalonsky High School. I went to Colby for undergrad, and I consider myself a Mainer through and through. Now, I've been gone a while. So suffice it to say, I left Maine like a lot of people do right after college in search of more, because I grew up like a lot of people in Maine with very little. And I was the oldest of three. My parents were teenagers when they had me. And there was this assumption that I think a lot of people make, I would say somewhat erroneously, and I say that with a lot of love and affection for my parents, that the more that you're seeking is out there. It's somewhere that you are not, and you need to go find it. And so, like a dutiful oldest child, I went off to search for more, and I landed in Washington, D.C., but I have done several tours of duty overseas. I lived in Spain, both during my undergraduate career, as well as a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholar to Barcelona. And so I've spent a lot of time overseas, and then have made the greater Washington, D.C. world my home base, if you will. But I climbed the corporate ladder. That's what I had in my mind, planted as a seed from my parents, different than the working class paper mill company environment that my father worked in and that we were raised in our community. My father worked in the paper mill industry, like so many of us in Central Maine, for more than 30 years. It was assumed that I would go off and get a quote unquote white collar job, right? So what do people think of immediately? Back in those days, it was like, are you going to go to med school or law school? And I thought both sounded awful. I didn't want to be part of either world, mostly because hospitals are not my forte and law just seemed dry. And so it did not fall on deaf ears that was probably not my calling, but I had to do something big. I needed to make them proud. I needed to do something to earn my way because, as my parents taught me, and I know a lot of people relate to this, failure is not an option and there is no safety net, right? As you kind of are pushed out of the nest at 18. So I moved to Washington, D.C. because I was recruited into a big firm to do consulting. And that's what all people who know nothing, who study general studies, could try to do, like consulting. I had no idea what I was doing. I had a big corner office and a credit card, and I was 21 years old going, what am I doing here? Seriously. Some big imposter syndrome going on. But it was great training ground for me to be in Washington, D.C. It's a very global city. I met a lot of people. I really had the aperture of my world opened up. I had traveled overseas by then. I had seen some things, but I had really grown up in this tiny little cocoon. And my little cocoon back in Maine, what motivated me was really trying to find a way to pave a path to end generational poverty for my siblings and I. And so I think, like a lot of kids that grow up in small towns, not just in Maine and not just in New England, but throughout America, that's sort of the mindset, right? Like, you have an opportunity to change the way things have been for generations in our family, and either you are up to the task or not. I was very much up for the task because I thought that was my job. So I worked like a fiend. I worked hard. I was very ambitious. I got great grades. I went to graduate school on full scholarship. I did all these things. But I continued to have this mindset that all of my self-worth, all that I was becoming, all that I was doing was somehow outside of me. So keep that in mind, because this is a very important part of the story later on. And that I would know what success looked like and what happiness felt like when I got there. And so, like a good hamster on a hamster wheel, off I went, 90 miles a minute or an hour. And it really hit hard in my mid-20s. So the quarter life crisis for me was, I'm exhausted. I've been doing this since 6 years old, like proving myself and working really hard and like overworking and overdoing it to get good grades, to guarantee that failure isn't going to happen, which, as you and I both know as entrepreneurs, is the opposite of what you need to do, right? What do they say? Fail fast, fail often, and learn. Absolutely. And I'm in a mentality back then of failure's not an option. Failure's not an option. We got to keep on this grind, hustle and grind mode and achieve the highest level we can get. And when we get there, all the good things will happen and I'll be, I'll live happily ever after. Well, happily ever after was not appearing. And by 26, I was incredibly burnt out. And there were many warning signs along the way. And I ignored them because I didn't know any better, because I had my sights set so far ahead, 5-year plans. Like I was the queen of a 5-year plan, starting at age 6, and then it revised at 11 and 16 and 21. And here I was at 26 for the first time in my life, starting to really have it all catch up with me. I had been in grad school at Georgetown now for a little more than a year. And I was studying business and marketing. I was in the School of Foreign Service and Latin American Studies. It was fully paid for on merit. And I was at the same time working in a full-time job as a communications director in an international organization. And I would run from one place to the next. And I didn't dare to say no to anybody, because I was taught, when given an opportunity, you step up and through the door. And you will figure out balance when you're older. There's lots of time when you're older to find balance. That's nothing for the young. This is your season of grind. Okay. That's what we're told. That's what I will do. I will be the queen of grind. Only what they didn't tell you is when you start getting sick, when you don't sleep and when you don't eat well, then your body is eventually going to start sending you warning signs. And mine did. I got mononucleosis really bad. And one thing that mononucleosis will do for anyone who has not experienced it is it will throw off your serotonin levels. And your serotonin levels are the receptors in your brain that control how your moods and how you feel and how you are able to think about your world and process what's happening to you. Needless to say, month after month after month, slowly I began this spiral downward into the pits of depression, something I had never experienced because I was the Energizer Bunny and I was going to go conquer the world and no one was going to stop me, because I was on a mission to make my parents proud and to prove that having me as teenagers was not the worst fate they have ever lived, that, I was going to redeem that whole situation for them and the shame we all collectively felt from it. And I was going to pave the way for my siblings, and we were all going to live happily ever after, because that's the way it was going to be. And instead, I found myself on one cold November morning, not unlike this day here, and it happens to be a cold, wet, rainy day in DC, staring out the 10th story window of my apartment building. Remind you, I was 26 years old. Right. And saying to myself, if I have to go through one more minute of my life, in my experience of life, I'm going to die. Like, this is just unbearable. And it was, the only way I could describe it was soul crushing. My brain was on fire. My body was no longer functioning while I was sick. And my soul was aching. In deep despair that what I was experiencing in life, going fast and furious and doing all the things and accomplishing all these things, was betraying my soul, actually. And it just ached. It ached for freedom. It ached to just soar in ways that I had it trapped and pushed deep down. Like if someone had said, what's the problem? I don't think I would have been able to articulate it in that moment, other than my soul ached. And so I found myself staring out the 10th story window, thinking to myself, the best thing I could do for myself is jump.
Wow. I don't want to necessarily bring you back to that moment, but I think that is, and we spoke about it earlier, the moment when you had that, and I don't want to say it's an aha moment, but that moment when you became aware, because I think so many people will be able to relate to that. But what was the feeling? And I've had it as well. There was a time that I made a drastic change in my life, and I don't know why I did it. And I want to think back, and I have my word, of course, as we spoke about, and I'm going to go back into meditation or something to figure out exactly what it was. I know it was a song, but can you just tell a little bit more about that time at 26 years old when you decided?
I can tell you it like it was yesterday because it had such a profound impact on my life. But if you were to take the darkest place that you've ever been in, and I know a lot of people have felt this sense of profound sadness, feeling lost, feeling utterly confused about what it was I was supposed to be doing, but I knew for a fact that what I was currently doing couldn't possibly be it because it shouldn't feel this bad. And also guilt, great guilt that the small town girl, had all of these phenomenal opportunities and I was supposed to be grateful. And instead of feeling gratitude, I didn't feel like I could stand another minute of it. And so there was something like, how disappointing was I? That was the feeling I felt, that I was given the opportunity and I couldn't stomach it. I must be weak. And I had never characterized myself as a weak person. I was a strong person. I was, the son my father did not have first in a female form. And didn't have it the second either. He got a daughter after that. It wasn't until the third time he got a son. And then, but we were buds. And I think he treated me like a boy in a lot of ways, in the sense that that time of growing up in America in the 70s and 80s, he was definitely very aware that it was probably harder for women. And so he was treating me like one of the guys. Don't you let them tell you you can do anything you want. There's nothing you can't do. And I believed every single last word of it. And I still believe it. But if you do not have a sense of who you are because you spent your whole life pleasing other people, which was my entire existence, you get to a point where who you really are is going to rear its head in the most inopportune times. For me, it was finals week, and say, hey, we don't care that you're really busy or that you don't feel good. In fact, because you don't feel good, maybe you'll listen. We're going to bring you right to your knees to wake you up. I honestly thought that that was it, that this was how my life was going to end. I saw myself jumping from that window. I felt my body fall. I felt the sensation of the fall. And in that moment of saying, I'm so profoundly lost, I found myself holding back, something catching me and saying, not yet. And I left, I think I had told you this before when we chatted. I left my apartment like instantly. I was probably wearing I don't know, pajama bottoms and a hoodie or something, but I needed to get the heck out of that apartment. I was alone. I didn't have anyone to talk to in that moment. And I jumped on a city bus and I made my way through the city with a bus driver and full of people, sobbing my eyes out, thinking, how did it get to this? I had the world, in the palm of my hand. I was accomplishing great things. I was doing things no one in my family had ever done. And everyone was so proud of me. And I have let them all down. That's what I was sitting with as 26 on a bus. And on top of it, feeling like, I guess happiness eludes some of us. And that's just the lot I'm going to experience in life, because I never felt at peace, because I had been constantly running like a hamster on a hamster wheel since I was 6 years old. It was really that moment. Everybody cleared off the bus within a couple hours. I'm on I don't know, loop number 3 going through the city. And this bus originates in Northwest, not far from the National Cathedral, and would go down Wisconsin Avenue, left on M Street through Georgetown, down by the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue, and loop back. I was just doing this loop. So, after the second loop, the bus driver knew I was there for the day. Like he wasn't getting rid of me anytime soon. And, I've got snot all over me. I've got hairs plastered to my face. I'm trying to just disappear into the window. And I had shown up in life from 6 on, very pulled together, very poised, very confident. I wasn't the tallest kid in my class. I was actually one of the younger kids because my birthday is the end of September. So the cutoff is October 1st or whatever. And I was always one of those kids who was like the bottom of the class in terms of height and growth until I got to high school. And I just remember thinking, all of those times, like sort of your life flashes before you. I was the kid who like would go to the front of the line and stand as tall as she could because nothing was going to stop me. I was going to make it. And here I was broken, completely broken on this bus. Like I didn't know if I was going to make it through the day. Even if I got off the bus, I might have gotten hit by a bus. I was just dazed and confused and lost and lonely. And I just felt like this is the last day I have on this planet. This is awful and pathetic and sad. I mean, all the things, all the awful negative things that one person can think about themselves and about their life, so consumed with their self-pity, because I was in this deep, dark self-pity place. Like, how can this possibly be that I worked so hard and I tried to make everyone so proud and I am so profoundly unhappy and so profoundly lost? How could that be? I tried so hard. And in that moment, it was almost like the bus driver could read my thoughts.
Yeah, and you're probably right. And I'm sitting here thinking, I love just how the universe works sometimes, and what it brings to me is I still am in awe. But my meditation this morning was about pausing. And I think back on what you just shared and how many people, and I was just working with someone the other day that commented that everything I'm saying about myself, and I'm looking at the notes that I'm writing, and I hear, soul sucker and carrying the weight and these things that you were saying about yourself, which a lot of people do on a daily basis. And this person was doing it on a daily basis. And then the one thing before I was actually thinking about the meditation was that when you were in that moment, when you could see the end, and I've been there myself, you paused. You just paused. And that pause, I think, is so important and so relevant for people just to, when I'm not feeling well and I feel like my thoughts are going, I always think, who am I being right now? And is that person serving my purpose? And that gets me out of almost every single bad mood or bad thought that I have. So when you're sharing that story, the first thing I thought, the most important thing for me was you just paused and you took a step back, and that pause enabled you to take those steps to the bus and, be a co-pilot for a bus driver for, a long time. But it started with the pause. It started with that moment.
And I think here's the thing. I grew up incredibly different with a very different mindset than, let's just say, my son, my 16-year-old, who's watched me and listened to everything I do in personal development for 16 years. He's 16 years old. He would be able to process a situation incredibly differently. I mean, 180 degrees differently, because he has information and understanding that I lacked. For as academically gifted, for all the work ethic I displayed, I was missing a huge amount of emotional intelligence at that age. I was not raised with the awareness of emotional intelligence. I felt my feelings and shoved them down deeply because I had to put on a brave act. I understood that to be the way things had to be. I have a obviously very different outlook now, 26 years later, than I did then. But it took a lot. It took moments like that day. I mean, on that bus, when all of a sudden it's me and the bus driver and nobody else. And the bus driver, I'm convinced, can read my thoughts and knows exactly what I'm thinking. And I was, like, oh man, poor guy. He must think I am a hot mess.
They're
I'm a hot mess.
They're like mobile bartenders.
Like, he was like, wow, what did the cat drag in? And, it's interesting because even at 26, and I would say this is very tied to the fact that I lacked the emotional intelligence I needed to make different choices back then. And that was something I needed to grow with later. I was a good person. I was a hard worker. I was a gifted academic student. I was very good at my job. I was a kind person, but that does not mean I understood how to process my world or my emotions in a way that demonstrated flexibility and adaptability. I saw the world through a certain lens and I lived that story until that story did not fit. And this book was going to get thrown out the window with me in it, the main character, or we're going to rip that page out and start a new one. And it was an interesting experience because as I'm thinking, please don't look at me, to the bus driver's staring me down through his mirror. And he said, sometimes we just need to surrender. And for me, that was like a novelty because surrender, holding up a white piece of paper for listeners here, I'm holding up the white proverbial flag. That seemed like defeat in my mind. And here was this older gentleman saying to me, sometimes the best that we can do is surrender. And it felt so peaceful when he said that. Then I said, I surrender. In that moment, it was like the universe opened up a whole new portal. It was almost like, those were the magic words, like open sesame, right? It just shifted everything. And I saw a sign that I had never seen before. I've walked on Wisconsin Avenue 1,000 times if I've walked that street once in my career at Georgetown. And all of a sudden, I've never seen this sign. It says Community Mental Health Center, exactly where this bus is now stopped on the street. So I pulled the cord, thanked the bus driver, got off, and went directly into the Community Mental Health Center during a time, I might add, when it was not something we talked about. And it was certainly not somebody you wanted anyone to know that you were having a mental health crisis. But I knew I was having a mental health crisis and I needed help. So the fact that I had the wherewithal to know that that might be a place that I could get help, I'm very grateful that I had that space in my mind to even entertain it, because I think a younger version of me would have said, I can't possibly go in there. What will people think?
Right.
And of course, nobody was watching me. There's a million people in that part of town. Nobody's watching. No one cares. You do your own thing.
Yeah, we all think that everybody's watching us, and the reality is really nobody cares.
Nobody cares. But in that moment at 26, I honestly could tell you, earlier version would have looked over my shoulder to make sure no one was watching. This one could not have cared. This one was broken. She knew she was broken. It was bad. We were at the end of stage of something big. And it transformed my life because I was willing to surrender. And I really do think for me, that was probably the biggest intersection with God, higher power, the universe that I have ever experienced in my life. Because I do think for me, my understanding of how this now works is in those moments of surrender, we actually connect to the part of us that is the most true, the most authentic, the most real, which is our spirit, which is our soul, which connects us to everybody else. It connects us all as, consciousness, and, your ripple effect is going to impact me, whether or not I realize it or not. We are all connected. And it's interesting when you're in that heightened state of, this is serious and this is possibly the end for me, to say I surrender and walk through this new experience, this portal, if you will, of divine intervention. Everything that happened from that bus driver being my guardian angel for that morning to the woman who greeted me at the mental health center, who I think I shared this as well, was an intern, probably my age now, the age I am now, but she introduced herself as Renee, the intern, to which I just blinked and my 26-year-old head was ready to pop off. Like, I get the person who doesn't, like, in my mind, intern was inexperienced. What I didn't keep in mind is that people have second careers. And this woman happened to have been a former AOL executive that then went back to study psychology. She became a mental health worker. It was her residency and it was her first day and week on the job. And I was her first person. And it was a divine match because I sat there going, she's like, how can I help you? And I'm like, you probably can't, all the things that a kid who's 26 with a chip on her shoulder who thinks she has to solve her own problems because, like a lot of people in Maine and New England, I do think this is a very New England trait, maybe American, but we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We don't ask people to solve our problems and we don't talk about our problems. We just deal with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I knew. And that's what I knew to be true. So I was like, you probably can't help it. I'm at the end of my rope. So maybe we'll see. Total chip on my shoulder. And it took her convincing me, like, I actually have had a long career in business. I was a corporate, leader. I was an executive. I was one of the partners. I took a buyout. Here I am. Now is what anyway, for me to relax enough to go, oh, maybe you might be able to help me. And she said, I have one question for you. And being the dutiful student always, I wanted a notebook and a pen and paper. And she said, you don't need a notebook, a pen and a paper. You will not forget this question. It's the most important question to ask yourself. After I told her my whole story and how I got here. And she said, okay, yep. And I'm thinking, she seems awfully relaxed about my whole story. Like, my textbook case here? Like, what's the story here? And she said, I have one question for you. Michelle, what do you want? And that just blew me away, Chris. What do you mean? What do I want? I want to be happy. I want peace. She said, no, but what do you want? You're living a life that you think others want you to live in order to make other people happy, in order to make other people proud, in order to pave the way for other people, in order for other people to have an experience that's not like what they would have otherwise experienced if you didn't make this sacrifice and go down this murder road. But what do you want? What do you want? Forget about all of them for a minute. What do you want? And for the first time in my life, I didn't have words.
You were speechless. Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted. No one had ever asked me what I wanted. And I didn't even know it was an option to have a point of view on what I might want. And she's looking at me like, that is the most important question. You spent your whole life being curious about a lot of things and studying a lot of things, not only here, but overseas. And you have never once asked yourself what you want. And I sat there going, well, I must have. And she said, well, clearly you need to spend more time thinking about it, because if you have, you've discredited whatever you want, or you have decided that what you want isn't worthy or valid, or it doesn't matter, or you don't think you can have it. And I remember her saying, you are too young, way too young to be saying to yourself that you cannot have it at 26.
Right.
And I felt, at 26, I'm getting pretty old. I'm 4 years from 30. Like, that felt really old back then. And I was tired. So I left and I probably went into my first bookstore at the time. There is this, I believe, is pre-Barnes and Noble days, but whatever the bookstore of the days was, maybe like Books A Million, and bought every quote unquote self-help book that I could get my hands on, because clearly I needed help and I was going to figure it out on my own. But that was really sort of the first time someone had said that what you want matters. And what I really came to learn from that experience is what you want doesn't just matter. It's not just nice to have or nice to know. It is mission critical. It is the reason why you were here. So I would actually say I knew for a really long time from the beginning that I wanted to help people. I was somebody who always wanted to think about psychology and positive thinking and motivation. I was on stages. I was doing a lot of that masked as something else because there wasn't a name for it back then. And my worry was my sister actually became a mental health worker. My sister at one point was the executive director of the largest mental health agency in Maine, TRICARE, Tri-County Mental Health. And now she works in the school system. But I remember the early days of her career and thinking, well, in order for her to do what she loves, I have to pick something that I don't love because her career was not going to be very profitable. It wasn't going to be something that was going to be prosperous. And she struggled financially. It was rough in the beginning. And so being the dutiful and loving older sister, I thought I had to pick. And my brother became a lawyer. So we filled out either end with this idea that some people get to pick what they love, but others then, particularly in a family, we loved each other very much. I was going to pick something that was going to make sure we had stability and security because that was something that eluded us as kids. We didn't experience it. We did have concerns with whether or not we would eat at times. We did have concerns with whether or not we would have a home or the bills would get paid. Like those experiences of fear, whether they would actually happen, totally different story. But perception is reality. And to little kids that have a perception that they might lose their home or their dad, the mill's on strike, and we have to receive boxes of food because we can't afford food. That had a profound psychological impact on us to the point where my sister and I, for a very, very long time, were always worried about food secure. I made more money than my parents did collectively one of the first years I worked. I still didn't know that it was enough. And here's the problem with that. Because of the lack mentality, I could be making 7 figures in that time. It would never have been enough. I would have been, okay, I can do this. And if I do it for 30 years, and then if I do this on the side, because I was constantly running away from the fear of not having enough, not being able to do enough, not being able to be enough. And so for me, one of the biggest turnaround moments of that whole experience was saying, I'm broken. I haven't spent any time really examining what I want. And maybe, just maybe, the way I've looked at the world isn't accurate. That was a huge turnaround for me because I saw the world very black and white, like many of us did. I think a lot like a young mind. Your mind is still very much growing in your 20s. And I would argue, people our age still, like some people have this is the way it is. And the reality is, you got to really poke holes in your own BS, right? And for me, it was constant. If I don't make enough, if I don't reach a certain level, the other shoe may drop and everything will come unwound and I will fill in the blank, end up destitute on the street without any food to eat, and I will die alone. Like it was this fear that was unfounded, but lived and raged in my head and propelled me to achieve a lot of great things. I mean, I'm an ambassadorial scholar. I was a graduate student who was completely funded in a time when it was hard to get that. Mm-hmm. I was planning to resign from the job to go full-time to graduate school. And they're like, no, you stay. We love you. Come when you can. Because I had great work ethic. So I felt like I owed them. I owed Georgetown. I owed my parents. I owed my siblings. I owed my friends. I owed everybody, except for I never considered what I wanted. And so in that moment of surrender, for the first time in my life, I was able to probably fill 2 or 3 of these kind of notebooks, these spiral bound notebooks that you get in college, with what I desperately want. is to, from the depths of my soul, connect with other people who are feeling like me and let them know they're not alone. Let them know that there's another way.
This is not a story of rags to riches. It's a raw and unflinching exploration of the shadows that linger even in the sunlit boardrooms. We delved into the crushing weights of internalized beliefs, the suffocating grips of shoulds and have-tos that steal the breath of authenticity. We heard of boardroom victories laced with hollow echoes and quiet moments of despair where the very foundation of success felt like quicksand. But in the darkest hour, a glimmer and a bus driver. A flicker of rebellion against the script someone else wrote. This is only the first page of Michelle's extraordinary journey. In part 2, we dive deep into the transformative power of embracing your true self. We'll unravel the intricate tapestry of what it truly means to be authentic, a concept as beautiful as it is elusive. You'll hear practical tools for silencing the inner critic, for rediscovering the passions that ignite your soul, and for stepping out of borrowed costume into the skin you were born to wear. We hope you're listening to this episode on The Mill, the new social media platform that inspires people to go live their adventures today so they have stories to share tomorrow. If you are, we invite you to go to the cafe and write a comment about this episode. You'll be automatically entered to win a special prize that allows you to start your day with a cup of character. So join us in 2 weeks as we crack open the door to a life reimagined, a life where success is measured not by titles and accolades, but by the quiet symphony of a heart singing its own true song. This is Character Talks, and your story, however hidden, deserves to be heard.